I just had the pleasure of speaking with Kris, who's into joint ventures and actually making businesses work and work together. And we talked about how you can actually use blockchain, look at the technology, look at AI, why it's a tool, and why a tool is totally different from being put in a category, and how that actually ties together with humans, and how we can go from social media that we have right now, that we're just consuming, to having conversations again in social networks like Farcaster. Enjoy the episode. Hey Kris, welcome to Tech Suite for the C-Suite. How are you?
Hey Samuel, great to be here. I'm doing amazing. How about yourself?
Good, good. Glad to have you, mate. Would you be so kind and introduce yourself a little?
Of course. So I'm Kris Gligoroski. I'm actually the host of another podcast, the Optimism Show, and my main focus is joined as a joint venture consultant. So really helping companies with partnerships.
That's lovely. In terms of partnerships, like that's the main thing that interests you about partnerships, right? Like it's in the middle job where you're not building your own company necessarily, especially as a consultant, but you're also not like on the other hand having your company buy something or join something, right? It's more of in the middle.
Oh, actually, that's an interesting way to put it. I haven't heard it before, but yeah, like you're right there. Like I would say, when it comes to partnership, the main thing that interests me and really why I focus so much on the blockchain space is because I know that a lot of companies, whether they're bootstrap or funded, have a lot of assets that they not necessarily leverage, and they have already invested sometimes millions of dollars in building these assets or like building a customer base and similar, and they just end up using one fifth of the potential. So why I'm really that interested in partnership is because there's so many different opportunities for companies to actually tap into other people's audiences, into other companies' audiences, or actually tap or actually use other people's assets that they already built, but they're not necessarily fully leveraging to create a much more uh, smooth experience for both partners and create a win-win situation where you get like an optimal use of resources for a start, and you also get a much more optimal use of VC funds if the company is funded, and it's
Don't
creates
don't get me started on the use of VC funds in the blockchain field. There's currently a joke on Twitter since Paul Graham did a new article called Founder Mode, where they justify everything with Founder Mode, and the amount of blockchain conference parties that I saw as part of the joke of why do we do this Founder Mode.
I haven't read that. Like it would be amazing if you can share that.
I haven't read the Paul Graham Founder Mode itself. I just saw some quotes out there, but didn't get a chance to fully read it. But the just Paul Graham saying anything and it just used as a justification anywhere is the usual thing. It's like the Steve Jobs was rude, so everyone has to be rude. Well, Steve Jobs actually was maybe potentially rude, but you also knew what you were getting yourself into in that this will be a hyper competitive project where if you don't deliver, I'm going to be mad at you because that's the expectation and that's what Steve said. So there's something to both sides, I think personally. But if you were to explain blockchain to an executive that potentially has no prior experience, how would you do it?
I had to explain blockchain to an executive that doesn't have prior experience. So I would actually explain that in a way that, because blockchain on one hand we have to consider that it has a lot of different uses, so it can be used for a lot of things, but if you don't have prior experience, I would like to tell you that blockchain, first of all, is much more than what you see with just crypto. That's the first thing that most people, I think, need to understand, because that is one thing that back in the days I was also did not take into consideration. So the technology of blockchain itself is so much more than just Bitcoin or just Ethereum or just a bunch of tokens or cat tokens that you might have seen, especially if you have kids that are in their teenage years buying and selling. It's a lot more than that for a start. And the second thing is something that allows the creation of really to streamline your business in a way that is practically impossible to peers. and to streamline things and movement of information, movement of money, that is impossible to pierce. I would put it in that way. Like I would say like it's a very good question, but it's, if I have to simplify it, then maybe that's the one of the main challenges we get in the blockchain communities. How do we explain it to outsiders? Like how do we explain it to people that don't necessarily super care about this?
Well, why would they care? Like, what's the core problem that blockchain solves?
Core problem would be privacy.
Well, aren't blockchains public? Like, can't I just see any kind of movement?
Everyone can see any kind of movement, and I think that's what makes it the most private thing, because it's protected. It's practically impossible to pierce. Of course, there's ways to pierce it if you have like a supercomputer, although I bet there are,
But like, if I see any kind of movement, how is it private?
because you don't attach your identity to it for a start.
Well, okay, then you would be very careful of what kind of exchanges you use and how you move funds and what addresses you use. Like, there's a lot more, I'd say, operational knowledge needed to really make sure that that's the case. But yeah, then it is. Also, what's interesting on that note is there are people developing blockchains that are actually fully private. So there's one thing you could actually get there. How would you think about?
I would say one thing that's really important is, and I would use this analogy, like because I like explaining things to, like, how would you explain it to a 5-year-old? I would say like blockchain is really like a magic notebook where everyone writes the same story, and once you write something, it can never be changed or erased. So everyone always knows that it's true. So whatever you put on the blockchain stays there. Like it doesn't matter if you have a server failure or anything, it's practically held by the collective.
Well, that's a fun philosophical point as well, right? Like, who's liable if the collective holds something and there's some data there that shouldn't be there or whatever, right? Like, if you want to publish something, say on the dark web, and that's where you did it before, there may actually be a chance that because it's just one server, it actually gets taken down. If you find a way to publish this on the blockchain, well, then you actually have to find any kind of node in that system that still has that data and shut it down. And you can't actually remove it from block history because, as you just said, well, the way that it's set up cryptographically, once you remove something, the whole chain breaks. So
Yeah.
it's not actually good anymore, and people will say, "Oh, we can't use it," unless they all agree to just remove that thing and just go with a whole different version of the chain. But if say you change history, then everyone has to agree that history is changed, because if they don't, you'll have two versions of history coexisting, and that doesn't work for a blockchain network.
No, not to get too deep into that topic, but in different ways, we've seen it happening over and over in the world, and it's been causing a lot of chaos. Regardless if it's history or something else, there's usually two groups of people with two different perceptions when technically both of them are kind of true. So blockchain really helps to unite those perceptions into one thing, and to practically have one reality that everyone agrees on.
You're
That's the way.
making you're making me think of Schrodinger's principle, where if you have a quantum object, it's either in this like one side or the other side that you just said, where both of them are actually kind of true. Just you have to look and then see what the actual truth is. So, like for information and financial movement, looking at the chain would actually be the source of truth in that sense, and really pinpoint it. Where one guy says, "Oh, I'm a millionaire," the other guy says, "A millionaire." You look on chain. Do you actually hold assets worth a million? And there's not
Yeah,
all assets are on chain, but they're slowly going there. So
exactly. Like more and more, like I think only a fraction of assets are on chain, and especially like putting assets on chain would allow businesses on all kinds of opportunities from the start of, like I've seen things happening like when businesses put assets on a chain and then they use those assets regardless of what they are as collateral, either to take credit or as collateral to do something else,
how is that
and to raise.
perspective like how is that perspective going to evolve? Like because every time the technology evolved, the human species also evolved, right? Starting from, okay, you had fire. Then from fire you went into, okay, we're actually now building houses. And with
Yeah.
houses came like farming. Well, actually, like farming came first, and then we have to build houses because we had to stay at this one place because we weren't nomading around anymore. From there we evolved into electricity, and then electricity was the thing for a while, and coal and steam and whatever before that. And then from electricity evolved to, oh, now we actually have computers, the internet, and now this AI thing. Like, how do you think that evolution continues?
It's an interesting topic. I would say this time especially, it's not like we are already evolving as species thanks to all the technology we have and to a lot of other things that are happening. But the main thing that I see, the main switch that is happening right now, and that definitely blockchain has a play in it, is actually, even though it might not look like it from a lot of people, I strongly believe and know that we're moving very much from the individualistic point of view to the collective point of view, and actually building things as a collective. And there's different silos in different industries that are doing this. And how do we raise together rather than just one person raising and then grabbing from the others? I think that is also a major play where blockchain has a massive impact in, because it allows us to actually surpass some of the human tendencies of like or like the emotions, to actually be able to work truly as a collective without having to worry about a lot of things. So that is actually a way of evolution that I think is happening right now, even though it might not be that evident.
How do you think in that evolution that like blockchain enables that because of the coordination it allows, the trustlessness, or because right now we're actually pretty fine with those trillion-dollar companies holding all the data and being those silos, right?
No, that's the thing. Like I would say, blockchain plays a. Of course, it's not only blockchain that enables that. There's a lot of different factors in there, but blockchain is a tool that helps it quite a lot, especially if we use it in the right way. And especially right now, if we look at it, there's so much infrastructure built for blockchain that it's only time to start build, like the time is now to start building consumer apps and actual applications that are truly valuable instead of building more infrastructure. Now, to get back to your question, I would say that blockchain allows quite a lot to play on the fact that those trillion-dollar companies that are literally created their own pyramids and pyramid structure, where it's usually not, definitely not the people holding the power, and definitely not the collective having a much of a say. Blockchain allows to change that, and at least to flatten out that structure at least a bit more, especially when it comes to social networking sites. Or like social networking sites is the most evident picture, I would say, of that, because there's no one person that controls, for example, your audience, or one person that controls what you have to say. Because I'm a big believer and a big proponent of the fact that everything should go uncensored.
Well,
Eh,
then you have to build your social media platform in a way that it can't be censored, and technically it won't be censored, right? Because
exactly.
if you build it with the assumption that, oh yeah, we can trust this one actor, then that one actor will always have a centralizing
Yeah.
power and censorship power. Where, as the same with like Bitcoin and Ethereum, you could potentially say, as you, as part of the network, I will not show this or not do this. But there's a lot of the other parts of the network that may do, and then it will still happen on
Yeah.
that same network. Like,
Yeah.
there's companies in the US that can't do certain things on Ethereum because of US regulation. But anyone else can still do it, and it's still the same Ethereum where we're not in that silo that you just said, right? Is that what you're getting to?
More or less, yes, I would say so. So it's practically, it allows for actual opinion or truth or some kind of reality to stay, regardless if someone agrees to it or not.
Well, the actual thing to stay, do you think that is going to evolve with AI? Is there going to be an actual thing with AI coming in and generating all kinds of things?
I would say, like in the end, if we really have to simplify, the core thing will stay the same. Like I'm not like I know that AI will have a large impact, and it has a large impact. But the thing is, I don't think it will change things that much. Will it speed up things? Will it increase productivity? Like we're already seeing the effects of it, and it's only like if you see it from a certain perspective, it's only the beginning. It's been like what 2 years since we
Yeah.
publicly had AI, and I don't know how many years it was in development, but it's only been like a couple years since like the general public has AI and consumers and businesses can use it in the general. And yes, there have been a lot of changes, but I personally don't think that the core will change just because now we have AI. Like on one side, it's pros and cons. On one side, it will make the like it is already making life a lot easier for a lot of people and like work a lot easier for a lot of people. But on the other side, it's creating a lot of creative distractions that get people in completely different loops. So
I
in
love
the
the
end,
wording
it's a
creative distractions.
yeah, very creative distractions, but in the end, it's a tool. It can be either used for good or for bad. The tool itself, I wouldn't say it's necessarily it's going to do that unless we guide the tool to do that.
Which is one thing that's often missed, especially in organizations or even regulatory bodies, even more so, where it's like, oh no, this thing has been used to do XYZ, then the tool must be bad. While the actual, it has been used to do whatever, it has been used. Somebody has used it too, right? We aren't banning knives in our countries. We're banning the use of knives to kill people. It's a
No,
specific distinction that we make. Whereas
okay.
with technology, because we don't understand that difference, that it's a tool, we're actually trying to ban it or not use it in our organization or have it do everything in our organization.
That's the thing, and that is also a form of censorship. It's pure censorship. You're censoring something because of your own not full perception of what it really is. And going back to your point, like when you stated like the invention of fire and the evolution of humans, like I can have a stick with a fire, and I can either cook something on it or I can bash someone like and actually fight someone with it. Is the
Yeah.
fire stick or is the stick I'm using like bad or good? I wouldn't say so. It just depends on the actual use of it. Same as with AI, and same as with any other technology. I would say that we're getting now. One thing that I think is pretty important for people to consider is that a lot of times, most of the times now you see the quote unquote bad uses of these tools. And consider that media, usually like bad news, spread a lot faster. They're like a story and all of that. So it suits media to actually share more bad news than what is really happening and how someone has been working for 2 years every single day. Like, where's the fun in that? To report it as a story, than someone that seriously messed up using the technology.
No, there's an interesting caveat to that where in the YouTube space, which is media and social media, and all of those new things, the video of somebody reconstructing a World War II tank, just fully reconstructing it, took like 2 3 years to fully reconstruct the tank, is a 10-minute video that got like a couple million views, but it is one point in time where this thing is going to have these kind of views and then it's gone, but it took 2 3 years to actually create this of we are going to reconstruct this full tank, whereas the negative news you're saying is the easy way to just get attention, so to say.
Yeah, but also there's another thing that we need to consider, and I'm glad that you brought that point up. I think a lot of people don't consider the fact that also positive news gets a lot of traction. It's just that in the general, like people are pretty much programmed, and people are like most people are more drawn to the negative one. So in general, there's a lot larger portion of the population that will be drawn to negative news compared to actually positive news.
Well, why do you think that is?
Uh, well, if I'm gonna try to explain it very simply, what do I think I is, but in general, it's because of how ourselves, and I wouldn't blame it on everyone else, on anyone else, but how ourselves we structured society in a way to keep us in certain loops, just to make sometimes life like with the explanation to make life easier for us sometimes. Same goes with the like Instagram and social media apps and everything. Like, are they bad? I wouldn't say so. Are they good? I wouldn't say so either. Definitely, but
Yeah,
they're a form of communication, and it's that's the thing in general. Like the algorithms and everything, especially right now with like the AI part, is it caters it so much to what you want to see just so you stay longer. And most of the time, even like if you consider staying a bit longer on the app, like you start feeling bad. So you're genuinely attracted, like you're genuinely more focused on those things. Like it's how the algorithms sometimes focus. Now that's why I would say like, and a lot of people are not conscious of these things, so they end up in the loop, and they're more naturally, without being conscious, attracted to more negative topics.
if
That's why
if
AdSpace sells more on negativity.
yeah, I do think that the negativity itself is part of the human species' drive to survive.
I mean,
Where
I'm not saying one or the other is good or bad, because we need both if we are
oh
to evolve.
yeah, but like for me, the thing of the negativity is if there's something really negative happening, I am highly drawn to it because it used to threaten my survival. Where now, because of that focus on the algorithm and how society now works, maybe the thing that is actually not threatening my survival, I sense it as that because that's just how I'm communicated. I think, but that's I think where the instinct comes from, and then the positivity is like nice that happened to you, but would this kill me? No. Do I care? No. Right.
No.
I think that's some part of how that happens. Do you think that that sense of negativity and idling on Instagram or any kind of social platform is like the end goal of the human species? Like is there an end goal?
I wouldn't say so. I think like the end goal of the human species is that we actually learn how to live, and we just stop in a sense of like so much. I'm gonna give you probably quite a philosophical answer here, but it's the end goal of the human species is more about focusing on living in the now and enjoying life now, compared to attaching ourselves to some majestic goals. Like, yes, it's amazing. That's what has been driving us for thousands of years. It's good to have those goals, but we don't have to kill ourselves in the pursuit of those goals.
Well, wouldn't
So I
the
wouldn't say negativity is actually where we're gonna end up or where we're ending up. Like it might look like the world is going out like that, but I wouldn't say that. Like I would say, like the world is a lot better than what it used to be. Like incomparably better.
the thing that brings to my mind is that in the Renaissance period, which a lot of us nowadays think, oh, this is like one of the greatest times. There's so much innovation happening, so much discourse and discussion. Dude, if you were living on at the beginning of the Renaissance period, you hated those people because they're totally against your way of thinking, and everyone used to think potentially like the world is going to end. Those people are going to ruin it all, and this was
Yeah.
the start of what we now consider modern life. So for us, it became normal to think that way, and the negativity and all of that is like, oh, we don't want some of those things to change potentially as well.
No, that's a good point. We're just used to sometimes those things that we lived for. That they're like genetically ingrained in us. That at one point we just have to realize them and grow past them, because that is what I think that will get humanity to the next level.
Which is also interesting, right? Like technology has evolved so much and takes like a next step, and now you're sitting here saying like, oh no, the actual human genetics and the human being itself did not take an actual step. It was just technology.
I would say it definitely has taken a step, because consider it, even if you look at like from the perspective of evolution, it's not that we stopped evolving. We're evolving even right now as we speak it, and like you're evolving consciously every single day. So I would say like until to see a large technology breakthrough, even in blockchain, I would say like it might take us some years for the human consciousness to actually increase. Because for a lot of people, the technology of blockchain itself is out of reach from a consciousness perspective. Because the potential, I don't think even as a species we do understand the full potential of the blockchain technology. Like I think there's so much more that we have not explored with blockchain that will only come in coming years.
So you're saying like, oh, it's more similar to something you don't know that you aren't conscious about, like the internet you weren't conscious about in 1996, but
Yeah.
now that your phone is a device that you have in your hand every time, and you see other people having their phone in their hand all the time, you're conscious about, okay, what is this phone thing? Show me. And then you get used to it, and now you're conscious that at like 1, 2, 3 clicks you can search however much or ask an AI to answer any kind of question, right? Is that where you're going? Where it's like the human genetics may not evolve, but the human consciousness of things does.
Sort of, because like think about it, in 1996 would you have guessed that the internet would be where it is today?
I don't know.
It's this, I would say it's the same logic that goes with blockchain. Like I think we're very early to actually realize the full potential of the technology. And the thing is there is that the way I see it, and the way that might be blocking blockchain a bit uh, in its growth, is that we try to apply it in ways that we're used to, when in fact it might open a lot more ways of doing things that we have not looked into. Same goes for doing business and like implementing it in a business, and do how you're doing things in general.
What's like the high level overview and like viewpoints? Maybe like one of or view on the more technological scientific side, and some more on the philosophic side of how you would actually apply, first of all, any kind of technology, and then blockchain in those senses where you're like, well, actually we haven't just applied it properly.
I would say like the one of the main things that, even when applying any kind of technology, and which is particularly evident with blockchain, and it has been in the past years, is that a lot of people, a lot of companies have used blockchain for the sake of using blockchain. Like the main thing that we need to consider there is that there is no point in using blockchain if the thing does not become better with blockchain. If it is already amazing uh, in all aspects on the Web 2, then why are you putting it on Web 3? Like, what's the point of making another clone of something that already exists? Now, if you can make it better, absolutely go for it. But there's a lot of companies that make Web3 clones that are a lot worser. Like they're a lot worse than what already exists there, and they're probably not even gonna get to that point.
So
That's the main thing that I think. Like also, a lot of people get a negative perception on blockchain is because they see those examples. Oh, it's the next this or the next that, and there is no competitive advantage other than the fact that they have blockchain in the name.
which isn't a competitive advantage if, as you just said, you're taking something that is actually working really nicely somewhere, and you just try to fit it in some other box where it doesn't fit, and then it's clunky.
I mean, how is that a competitive advantage though? It's
No,
just
it's not. It's not.
not. It's not. Not
Like
at all.
just
But there are ways, for example, which I think Farcaster is actually gonna is doing very well in social networking, uh, practically social media and social networks in general. There's a lot of room for improvement there, because in the end, we practically gave away the power to just the corporations when it comes to social network.
what's the thing where, as a human, I'm saying like, oh yeah, this is the great evolution of, say, like social networks in that sense.
I don't know what is going to be the next evolution of social networks, but I really do like what I see with Farcaster, especially the type of community. First of all, I would say Farcaster as a protocol is amazing, but the other thing is the main thing that makes the network so amazing is the type of energy in the community that is building around that protocol. And I don't know how that ended up to be, but I would say it will probably grow. I don't know in what way.
For me, the initial history and why that network feels the way it feels and that energy towards like building something, whatever, is because first of all, the founders of the network still are followed by mostly anyone on that network because it's small enough to just be that large community with a lot of sub communities, where the sub communities are getting more pronounced now, but it's still one flock in that general sense. And they also onboarded a lot of developers early, where most of early people are investors, developers, and founders, which have a certain kind of vibe towards change, drive, and optimism, which is likely what people feel and really want and care about on the network right now. Whereas if I'm looking at general social media, as you said earlier, there's this like, oh, I'm just scrolling the feed, or I do get all of my negative news and all the. A lot of people are actively consuming that, and either I think that behavior will change, or Farcaster as a community in however much time will either also be more similar to what we have in terms of a human flock, uh,
Mhm.
or just die.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I wouldn't necessarily. I actually am quite bullish and quite optimistic about Farcaster in general, because looking at it from a bigger picture, I think it has a lot of potential. Although it might not be this exact potential of just being a social media platform for the masses, at least not anytime soon. But I think that the main thing, also the technology, blockchain itself, allows for that community to function because people don't have all these worries. Like, technically, even if you look at it, X, like Twitter, now X, was promising to have some form of like that kind of those kind of interactions. Like, have
Meaning
like
like the
sense,
positivity, or the
like
instant way to pay somebody or to tip somebody if they do something nice, or like
I
if
would
they
say
do
I
a
would
gig
say
for
like
you.
in general the basis, which is like the lack of censorship and the actual allowing for humans to communicate on the platform and everything. But it's still owned by a single corporation, and I think that even subconsciously people keep that in mind. Like even if they're not
Well, they surely do, in the sense that also, like a
because
friend of mine just today created a new Twitter account because he wants to post about a project that we're building and just document all of that. And then he wanted to change his username, and the platform was like, no, you can't actually change your username. We're going to rate limit you because we think you're a bot now. And that is like, if you were to do that on Filecaster, you can just go to the blockchain, change your username in the registry because that's all on the blockchain and it's done. If you then want to post something to the network that is happening off blockchain in the Filecaster network, and you then post your message, and your message will for sure be posted if it's you posting it. The question then becomes what you're saying in terms of censorship is like, is that message that is for sure posted onto the network now shown to people? And that is where people following you or not following you, the app deciding that is against our content guidelines, this is against our policy, this may not be allowed under applicable law in that country, like, right? This is where then the display of it becomes a little more distorted, but you can still do it, similar to like
yeah,
a
but
paper where I can draw any kind of illegal sign on a paper, but that paper will not censor me. The people will then take that piece of paper and make sure it's not seen, right? But that's different.
that's also like it's a form like we need content curation if you consider that. Like not everything can be shown to everyone because we'll have to spend 100 hours every single day, which we definitely don't have, just going through stuff. So I think like especially like the what the protocol and what blockchain will do for social networks and is the different UIs. For example, we have Warpcast and different UIs for accessing Farcaster. They all have their own sort of they can all have their own sort of algorithm, and they can all have their own mode of content curation. I think that's quite important. If you want a certain thing, go to a different UI.
What you're saying is really great because it's go to a different UI. You don't need to change platforms. Whereas today, if you want to if you want to see half naked girls, you actually can't do that anymore on Instagram because they changed the policy to be like, oh, bikini mostly. But on Twitter you can see them, and if you want to actually pay and get them fully naked, there's another platform for you to do that. If you want to see like politics discussion from a little more actual, like, real discussion, you may want to go to Reddit, you want to go to Twitter, but you can't really go to Instagram or Facebook because that company isn't surfacing that content that well in that UI, or even in the way that they allow their guidelines to work. Whereas with Farcaster, it would be like, oh, you could still see all of that on Farcaster. Now you're just changing the UI of how you interact with
Like
that network,
the
which is
content
like,
out there.
but that's also, like you said, a different conscious model. Like a lot of people I talk to right now, and it's like 2024 in Filecaster, are confused. Like, what do I like? Oh, they want to use Filecaster, but then they're confused. Oh, they're just like, I have to pick my UI. Like what? Like you don't. The closest thing to that is potentially a browser, where you pick your browser. You may want to choose Firefox, Chrome, Safari, but
But
most people, I don't think, choose their browser. They either use Safari or Internet Explorer, or if they may choose, they choose what everyone else chooses, which is then either Chrome or whatever, right?
I have to say two things. First thing, if you're still using Internet Explorer, it might be time to change. Uh, and the second thing is, especially for the C-suite executives out there that are interested more in this topic and would like to dive in deeper into it, go on Farcaster and just pick Warpcast. Like Warpcast is a better than more like it's actually an amazing start for you to start getting into the community of builders and getting that feedback. After that, you can expand to different UIs. It's just not to complicate the
Yeah,
whole like
that,
Warpcast is a good enough starting point.
that's what their main team driving Farcaster is also doing. They're pushing Webcast, which then for some people is like, okay, I want to use Farcaster, but why is it telling me about Webcast? And they can't put the two together, which is one thing where that is like, you now know that you need a browser to access the internet. Whereas as a developer, you may say, no, I actually don't need a browser. I can access the internet from my terminal, whatever. Chill, dude. The regular end user is gonna pick a browser, surf the internet, right? It's like same with Farcaster. You can post directly to Farcaster, but dude, 99% of people will pick a UI and post it there.
Including the
Where, yeah, even developers, and that's what you're saying. That is really really cool. And I would say, like, if you give Farcaster a shot and you go on there, make sure that you're not leaving before you have thoughtfully replied to a lot of people. Because the main difference for me is how it surfaces replies. You actually see who replies to you, and if somebody that I follow replies to you and I don't follow you, I still see that. Like my home feed, the actual home feed, where usually it's just like content, will see those replies, and then I can discover a lot of more people, and I actually have conversations. So we're changing from social media to a social network potentially, is what a lot of people say. And on top of that, if you're then starting to dabble into that, I would actually say, like, Kris, your show, and your podcast, then really takes one deeper down that rabbit hole, I'd say.
yeah. Yeah, I would completely agree. And I like how you, I haven't heard that before, but I like how you said like we're moving from social media to a social network. I think that's a major shift that blockchain might allow to happen. And I'm saying might because it's still very early on,
Yeah.
but I honestly hope that it will allow it.
If from me, the interesting thing that you brought up is the consciousness of it. Whereas the human consciousness has to evolve for social media to turn into social networks. Whereas right now we're sitting there consuming television shows, and then we got into the internet with public forums and discussions of that. That was a network. Whereas then we moved back to the television shows of actual like social media, maybe we're moving back to a discussion based thing again, or we have probably have both because there's different audiences, I'd say. Like sometimes I don't want to actually have a discussion about the future of technology, Ethereum or whatever, right? I just want to consume media, just get my head out of something or just waste 15 minutes.
Course, like we all want to do that sometimes. So, like no need to be in the 5 a.m. club, 16 hour, 20 hour workday, 3 hours sleep.
But to me, that is one thing where a lot of people that aren't in those grind sets and that consciousness of maybe what they want to achieve, and that doesn't align, they're sometimes saying like FileCaster is to them too much of a grind because a lot of people that were onboarded and came there early are way too like entrepreneurial or hyper driven and whatever. And I think that is also evolving as more and more people join. There's also fun activities that you can do. There's like apps within the app where there's an explore page right now in Webcast. They may change, their UI is changing a lot, and there you can just play like Flappy Birds that Matthew Fox did, or I put a snake up there like a snake game, and then you can play other games, and then you can just idle within the social app, and then you can share your score after and get some engagement and have some fun.
I mean,
So
I think a lot of I'm sorry, like I really wanted to add this point. Like in general, the going back to like the social media to social networks, and this is also why I think a lot more, especially higher level business executives, should start looking into these things, is because blockchain in general allows, first of all, the technology is more aligned with nature rather than just a one-sided media pushing and consuming thing. And I think that if more and more, for example, taking that example of like social networks, if more business executives that are actually quite powerful enter this network, first of all, there's a lot more opportunities for them because they're extremely early on. And second of all, it can help within their companies. Can I tell you exactly how it can help? Probably not, because every company has different challenges and different scope of challenges, so the different focus points. But I'm sure that there will be things that will be discovered that a lot of bigger companies will start changing as well. And I think that is also quite powerful with blockchain. Like it can help big companies change as well. Those tech giants that are already having $1 trillion industries and owning $1 trillion industries might start changing from within. Can I tell exactly how? No, but I just have a feeling that's why I'm sharing it.
is like is there some like philosophical or like scientific
I wouldn't
principle behind it? What sparks that thought?
Primarily, I would say what sparks that thought is that blockchain in the first place helps the people become more, like it helps speed up the movement from an individualistic to a collective society, just with how the technology is built itself. And I think that is going to have the most power, because even if you look at it, a lot of the things that have been made from so far have been done from an individualistic perspective. And as a collective, we can make the world a lot better for everyone, including us.
Can you give some examples of moving towards like a collective? Because like, we just talked about a social network versus a social
I would
media
say,
where
like Farcaster is a very good example of a very small example, of course, but a very good example of how we're moving from individualistic to collective, because collaboration and actual working together, at least that's from my experience within Farcaster, is the main thing.
oh, yeah.
And
But that's also because maybe it's still too young, right? Like the internet is initially in social media, you actually work together, like you weren't hostile towards another community. Whereas then
that's
once your community becomes big enough and economically viable and important enough, you may actually then want to start capturing the whole thing. And so there's something where I want to say like don't just mistake the potential early culture of something for
no,
that,
that's a good.
but I think the technology of how that's built also, because you said, well, the technology underlying it all is what defines it, And on Farcaster, because it's so open as a technology in general, there's a lot of space for me to just, without asking you even, build on top of your thing.
Yeah,
And I can do the same thing that a UI has to do to communicate with you. I can also do just by building my own UI. And now, without even asking you, I've built something on top of you. Same with blockchain, where the programs on, say, like an Ethereum chain, I can just interact with. And now I'm building my own thing on top of your thing, so to say.
yeah. And I think you explained that perfectly. And that is also one of the main things that, of course, don't mistake the early culture with what it can evolve into. But the other thing is that the technology allows for so much more freedom than what was previously there.
Do you have a good sample that shows it, like outside of Farcaster?
I cannot think of anything else. Like to me, like Farcaster is the best case study for that because it's a social network and you can see it quite evident. Plus, I spend most of my time there lately, so
Have
I
Is
have
there
not
any
looked.
financial example? It's like blockchain is quite financial as of in 2024. It's like a financial example of moving from individualistic to a more collective.
I cannot think of any specific one. Like,
Uh,
what do you think? Like, what are some more specific ones there along these lines?
well, for me, the collective is, well, on the blockchain we're doing a lot more crowdfunding, and we're doing a lot more money pooling that
Yeah,
isn't
that's
done
the idea.
within like regular industries. Like there's a lot of companies easily just sending money somewhere and being like, this is the mission, we're behind it, here's money. Whereas in the treasury world you would have to do a lot more courting of, oh, how can we get the funds, who's controlling the bank account, who's doing whatever. Whereas on a blockchain I could just program the rules of where that money is going, so you could just send that money there and you know that those rules are upheld. So that is one thing, but that also may still be to blockchain being early, but the technology of, I can build this thing where if everyone sends money there, we know how that money is split, right? Like we
That's
could
a
say, oh, on blockchain we want to foster this foundation, and foundation meaning like in the web 2 sense, a lot of the actual technology we use for the internet is held by, say, the Linux Foundation or the Cloud Native Foundation for infrastructure. And then I could donate to that foundation, and then I'm just trusting that foundation to do right with my money. Whereas on
yeah.
blockchain, that foundation could set up a program, a smart contract, to say, okay, I just want that money to be dispersed into the treasuries or the wallets or like the bank accounts of these
XYZ.
individual projects. It's like the
Yeah,
foundation says, we recommend you to send to us because we have set up a split of 1% for us as operation and maintenance fee, 20% to this large project, 20% here, and then split it all out. Whereas today you just trust that foundation to publish a report once a year that you don't even read, right? And I think that's easier to do collectively and on blockchain, because then the collective is the primary way of thinking about it. You're thinking about the actual collective of that foundation instead of the individualistic projects that are part of it, where the foundation is just a label or in the back.
and even like, and thank you for sharing that. Like, I didn't think of that perspective, but yeah, like, and another thing, like, also corporate companies, like large corporate companies, could benefit a lot because on one side it could help eliminate a bit of all the politics when it comes to budgeting and make it a lot more streamlined in the first place within the corporate sector.
You could automate a budget where it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
we're
you can
passing like, as a founding father of a company, you could say, okay, this is the budget that I will have in perpetuity, and you could just force your company to always use that and just make deal with the money. Like, if you want more money in your sector, increase revenue.
you're cutting off a lot of the bureaucracy. Like I wouldn't say you're cutting it all off, but you're cutting off a lot of the bureaucracy that it's just not necessary.
Is there like an actual business sample where you're like, oh, in a joint venture that you have worked on, this would actually really really help?
From this perspective, yeah, I would say like especially when it comes to as the middleman, because usually I'm the middleman in joint ventures. And I love being the middleman. I would say like a lot more people should consider being the middleman, especially like to me, like especially if you like working in different sectors or with different companies and making connections of things. Being the middleman is definitely worth trying to, and that is your main thing. You're bringing a lot of value by connecting people. And the payment infrastructure, like there are some Web2 platforms that allow it, although like escrow and similar, but I have not seen anyone doing a great job. And actually, if I don't remember the name, I think it was Covariance. There are some platforms that specifically focus on the payment structure for what we were just talking. Like when it comes to joint venture, in a joint venture setting, if you have a partnership that, for example, let's say you're paid on a commission,
Yep.
with a smart contract, everything is made so much easier.
Well, yeah, because you can just say like everyone you bring, you tell those people use that payment system.
Yeah,
Like send the money there, and their billing. You can just set up a contract where any kind of thing they do, they would just have like a legal contract because you still need that. And then you just say this is the contract that every kind of fund transfer has to go through, and then you just automatically pay your commission. They actually don't have to do any kind of accounting for it because the one person just sends it there. It gets split automatically. There's no, oh, I'm receiving the money. I have to send it to you. Can you please send me an invoice? No, that bullshit.
exactly. And I think that is one thing that I'm really looking forward to having developed in the space because it's something that would truly change things up. There are some, as I said, there are some Web2 platforms that have tried it. They like I haven't found a single one that's doing an amazing job.
Well, how could they, right? Like they would still have to do all of the accounting and issues because the underlying infrastructure,
Does not
blockchain,
allow to do it without the
yeah, the blockchain would allow it. The underlying in
blockchain
Web
would
two,
allow it. The existing infrastructure that is there for like Web2 platforms does not. And like just think of like in business sense of things, and this is why I think like C-suite executives especially need to hear this, um, especially when I'm not gonna say like necessarily having to fire people, but using blockchain in this kind of environments would allow for so much less manpower to take care of so much more in a much better and much more organized way than before. Now you don't have to go and like fire a bunch of people, but they could be put in a place where they also have like their work also has higher leverage and the company could evolve further.
I feel like a lot of the things we're touching on between how we as a like we too have a perspective on technology in general, like as a tool, is like any kind of thing we've seen is like, well, whether you just believe in AI but don't believe in crypto, or whether you just believe in crypto but you hate AI, or you don't believe in both. Like we're actually
You
just
don't
saying like, oh, just adapt your perspective a little bit and use it as a tool, and then there's really cool things you can do with both, but you realize that they're not the end goal of the human species, as you so nicely put it, where that may or may not even exist.
I mean, who knows what is gonna come? Like, did we know the internet's gonna come? Did we know blockchain is gonna come? Did we know AI is gonna come? Who knows what's next?
Do you have a personal way of making sure that you keep that perspective and that you always like have a fresh perspective, change your perspective?
Yeah, like technically, I would say, and I'm still guilty of doing this sometimes, although I catch myself a lot more, is see the thing for what it really is. Like, don't see the thing through the lens of someone else. And I would say, like, especially because my like a lot of my focus is on media and networks and how networks function. Um, I mean, networks in the terms of human networks. I would say like see things not through the lens of someone else and what someone else thinks, but see things as the core as what they are. And if something is like boil it down to the simplest, like sometimes it helps to boil it down to the simplest ingredients it has and how they function at a base level.
Is there something you do to help encourage that?
Just Yes, exactly. Yes, there is something that, but it's not more of what you do, but it's more of what you don't do. And when there is a certain technology and tool that just look at the thing and look at the picture, what it is, both from the microscopic level and a macroscopic level, and don't jump to conclusions. It's actually don't. It's more like don't do anything than do something, because we're so often used to doing more and more and more that we get stuck in a loop. So it's sometimes, like a lot of times, you should not do anything to actually see the thing that you're supposed to do. And I think that a lot of executives, like when it comes to blockchain and AI, will change their perception quite a lot when they actually see the actual technology for what it is and not for this or for that, or just to actually please the investors and the stakeholders so the stock price goes up.
Pleasing the investors is a lot of fun in the sense that when you're just in the space for a while, you're just seeing people go in and out, in and out, in and out, depending on whether the current sense of time is that, oh, I can raise a lot of money in AI, in blockchain, now in GPUs and chips and hardware and whatever kind of thing. Where they're doing what you're saying to not to is like they're jumping to a conclusion of, okay, this is going to be the next thing, instead of just looking at the thing on a macro, where is it going, micro, what is it, and then making a decision based off that of, do I think I can accomplish and whatever.
Yeah, because we're like, oftentimes we just want to do things and we want to do them now. And personally, for example, like I actually focus most of my time, like I shifted a lot of my focus and a lot of my work from actual SaaS and like bigger corporate companies to now being almost like most of my time and focus goes into Farcaster, especially this past month. And I'm not even planning to stop. I'm actually thinking of even investing even more in myself in that. First of all, because I wouldn't even say the potential growth of the platform, but because it's just feels right.
That is what happened to me. He pulled me in
Feels
that way.
right.
Yeah, it just piqued my interest, and never, I haven't lost that interest. So I just have done more and more and more and built more and
Like
more and
just
more.
increases. Like
Yeah,
wait, like
and then it piques your interest more because you realize, like you just said, what then you get a better feel for the micro, which then gives you a better feel for the, oh, this is what it can actually do on the macro sense. Uh,
exactly.
Whereas anything in the middle is like, oh, Farcaster, the team raised a bunch of money. It's small as a platform, and there's not a lot of people. It is still, sometimes it has a LinkedIn vibe. Sometimes it doesn't have a LinkedIn vibe. Sometimes it's just networking. Sometimes it's too crypto. We don't have crypto discussions anymore. Like that's this, like we too should probably coin something between the micro and the macro that is just sitting there. Sometimes we would call this bullshit, but this is where a lot of people operate, in this, like in the middle.
Yeah. A lot of people operate in the middle, and that's completely okay. But
I have a
we'll see
saying
how it evolves.
from watching how taxes work: the middle always gets screwed. And I'm not using screwed when I talk off air, but I'm using the F word usually. But it's like, well, if you're in the middle, then you have to pay the most taxes. You don't benefit the most from taxes. If you're on
Yeah.
top, you don't have to pay a lot of taxes. You still do benefit from the taxes because you get all of the infrastructure built that enables you to still do whatever you want to do. Whereas if you're on the bottom, well, okay, yeah, you don't have to pay a lot of taxes because you don't have a lot, but you actually benefit from a lot of the payments that are coming in from the middle. It's like, well, how can it be that the top and the bottom benefit and the middle is just the general population most of the times, but it doesn't really add up, right?
No, that's a very good point, actually.
So no, but that's interesting. Is there like something you see on the horizon as like a big opportunity that you're seeing?
I would say like now the biggest opportunities are. It's really about, first of all, sitting down and looking back, looking into, like I wouldn't necessarily also tell executives and whoever else just to overnight jump into blockchain, but I would actually sit down and ask, like, look at what you currently have and ask practically, is this the best way to do it? And then to just a bit understand blockchain technology and see how in some places it can be applied. Like, I cannot tell you like it will make everything better, and everyone who tells you that will is probably lying to your face, because it's a technology, it has a particular use. Also, like, fire is technology, and you cannot use it to like speed up your internet. um, so it really depends on the use case, but I would actually stay down and look into the main challenges and see if like they can be actually solved or even made a lot better just by implementing blockchain technology. So it's really from use case to use case on the horizon, but the bigger picture that I see, especially like in Web3 and blockchain, is that soon, it's still very early, but soon I think we'll start seeing a lot more consumer apps that are actual like that are quite useful and that are providing a lot of value to consumers. And they're on the other side, they're also um, they might not even be labeled as blockchain. They just might use the technology. And I would say like it's still very early on the trend to explore this trend for a lot of people that might want to look into the apps and might benefit a lot, because it open like blockchain opens so many more possibilities that have not been there before.
Is there like a general resource or any guides where you're like, okay, this is what I'm usually looking at when I research blockchain or when I want to look more into it?
Uh, Personally, I would say like this is just how I function, because I'm not someone that wants to read news a lot, and I don't consume a lot of news information, even though I'm generally researching media and like networks, as I said. The main thing that I would say like is the most benefit, especially as an executive, um, and what has helped me also as a joint venture consultant, is like, if you want to enter an industry and understand more for an industry, go join first of all where they are. In this case, Farcaster, Warpcast as your UI, and go talk to people. Like, go and talk to people. Like, people are more than open to speak to you. If at the very least you can offer people like to buy a Starbucks or to buy them lunch and just have like 5, 10, 15 conversations, you learn a lot more than going and scrolling through endless news sites. That is my
That's a good
perspective
one.
on things.
Also,
Yeah,
like on
that's my
Farcaster,
perspective.
you by replying to to people on Farcaster that post about the thing you want to talk about, and I'm like, oh, I actually have this business, and we're exploring this, and I would love to talk to you. Or as a person, I'm interested in doing that. I would love to talk to you. They are most likely going to just agree to have a conversation. One thing, when you set up
Yeah,
your profile, make sure that you have a profile picture name and description set that isn't like the generic blockchain developer or like CEO of a company or whatever. Make it a little more personal, because on those networks there's also a lot of spam, and sometimes the UI hides it well, and then humans stick out or not. And especially if you're a new profile, I think it really helps to have a just generic, however, what feels good to you, profile picture, name, and description, because that's what people will look at when you reply, and they're like, should I get on a call with that guy? It's like, click it. If the description is interesting and they've replied to a bunch of people, and there's like one or two posts, maybe like, where do you share what you've did on the weekend, or some stuff like, this week I did, then that's interesting. Otherwise, you just may come off wrong, sadly.
yeah,
No, that's
absolutely.
that's
To
that's
just be
lovely.
human and
Uh,
go talk to people. You're gonna learn a lot more, a lot faster, and you'll know if this is for me or not. Like, you can read news websites and everything like for years and still not understand because you're just in your head.
well, and you're consuming the people that try to understand it. You're not trying to understand it, right? You're consuming. You're not
Exactly.
actually understanding.
Rather than seeing yourself. Rather than seeing yourself.
It's entertainment compared to going to the library and reading the actual books, right? It's the watching a physics lecture of Stanford on YouTube is entertainment potentially, whereas like doing the physics experiment yourself is learning and doing, right? So
Exactly.
thank you so much for sharing your perspective and coming on, Kris.
And thank you, Samuel, for the opportunity. Like, this was really fun.
Is there a place where you would love for people to check what you're doing?
Farcaster, definitely. Like, I'm documenting, like, I'm really starting to document most of the process on Farcaster. And I believe that's also the best way for people to connect with you.
Oh yeah, for me for
So
sure. But this is about you. Like, can you spell out your Farcaster name for people?
for like Farcaster and LinkedIn, but mostly in Farcaster, I'm at the Kris with the K. So the Kris
Yep.
on Farcaster. I'm happy I got that name. I did not get Kiki, which is how most of my friends call me, but I got the Kris, and I'm very happy I have that on Farcaster. So you can find me pretty easily there. Feel free to shoot me a message. I'm always down to chat, and would be happy to share my findings as well and guide you along the process.
Perfect. So like the first address you go to when you want to learn more is actually just DM Kris. If you want to also DM me, we're open on Farcaster, and then you have your first conversation. From there, we could most likely direct you, right? Where you're saying like your main job is to connect people, so you know a lot of people
Exactly.
to like, oh, this is what it is. I thought it's this. Oh, maybe it's actually this. And then you're like, yeah, no. Talk to those 5 people, and you'll get a better understanding. And then you don't just come to a conclusion directly, and you're actually open and you understand the macro and the micro. That's
Yeah,
lovely. Thank you
exactly.
so much, Kris.
Thank you, Samuel.
Thank you for listening, and thanks for the guests for coming on to Tech Suite for the C-Suite. In the description below, or the show notes, whatever you want to call them, you will find the awesome resources our guests mentioned to get you started. You can find links to our guests, and you all can also find a summary, takeaways, and other links to keep connected with the show. Thank you so much for listening. Have an awesome day.